Hey there, welcome back. I'm going to spare our innkeeper the work. The roads are still waylaid. The crew could not make it for their journey. I have the second part of my story from last week, the second part of Black Fruit, which I'm going to read to you now. And if you like Strummer's Tales, there's another one called The Seven Sealed Flask in this podcast feed before. You can also read more stories like this from Savage Realms Monthly. They published this story back in December 2025. Anyways, let's get into it. Here we go. The next chapter, whatever chapter that was, this is the next one. The old moon had risen by the time Strummer's eyes opened. Whatever had enveloped him had dissolved into something runny, wet, and slippery beneath his fingers. In a panic, he scoured the ground for the hunting sword and raised it like a ward. But all was quiet. The thing was gone, and with it, Aelric. Even in the dim light of the stars above, the place looked like a butcher's shop. Someone's insides stretched across the camp like rotting ropes, and the whole place was putrid with blood. If he had anything to puke, Strummer would have evacuated his entire stomach. The key! Up close, Dabin was worse than Strummer thought. He tried not to look too closely and focused entirely on the man's belt. "Sorry, mate. I tried. I really did. Your kindness won't be forgotten," he said, almost as silent as a prayer. The locks turned easily once Strummer had the key. Freedom felt better than he hoped, and with it came renewed interest in his effects. Luckily, Dabin had thought to toss his mandolin toward the safety of Aelric's tent before entering the fray. Picking it up from the mud, he was relieved the case did its job and kept the thing dry. Satisfied, Strummer set to finding his bow, but had no luck. He wasn't sure who was even responsible for it, but if it wasn't broken, he couldn't find it. Even his sword was gone. He'd never find it in the dark, at least. Dion's hunting sword had at least proven durable, and it was right where he dropped it. Away from the carnage, Strummer found Sniffer and Ewan. The tracker was covered in blood, but moved with little signs of distress. As Strummer neared, he realized Sniffer must have been painted red with blood, trying to help whoever he could. On the ground before him was Kenya. Her hair was like fire in the glittering lamplight. She was done for, but she clung to life yet. Sniffer took her hand in his own and reassured her the worst was over. Ewan, however, was in shock. He saw Strummer approach, but he looked right through him. His face was gray, his lips pale and blue. Strummer tried to get him to sit, to rest, to slow his breath, but the boy was deaf to words. "Where's Argent?" Strummer asked. Without looking up, Sniffer replied, "He and Perry went after it." The bastard wasn't dead. That was something. But he took Pike, and the flask for which Strummer risked too much. His bow, gods be damned, could be replaced, even his mandolin, though it pained him to admit. But Pike could not. He was a thorn in his backside in death as much as he was in life. And the flask, well, if some fool opened that, let the damned thing out. Strummer was lucky to have captured it once. It wouldn't happen again. "Where?" Strummer asked. Sniffer pointed across the clearing and into the trees. "You know Black Rock?" Strummer did. "'Twas said the witch holed up in the old keep. I was to deliver him there by next night." "What's this woman to you lot? Surely you don't mean Bazu. She's just a story." Sniffer gave an exasperated snort and considered how to answer, wondering what words were best before he must have realized It didn't matter anymore. Shigarak, not Bazu. She was mistress to Lord Aelric's father. She now carries his baby brother. Honor demanded that Aelric secure the babe. All this, Strummer waved a hand, for spite? A black fruit, man. Strummer knew many in the West believed that men had as much claim to the babes as women, but it was not so where Strummer was from. The promise of black magic compelled him. The threat of a spell come the new moon, Sniffer said. The new moon was soon. He'd have only until sunset. He didn't have much time. What about him? Strummer asked, tipping his chin to Ewan. I'll take him back to the city. He'll likely be the only one who could tell Lord Edgar what transpired here. Do you mean to go after them, then? That bastard took my friend's head. Would you do any different? Yes, he answered flatly. Strummer didn't know what to say, so he bid them well and departed yet further south with his back to the Staghorn. He prayed to be held in its lofty embrace soon. Next chapter. Black Rock was a pimple on the verdant face of the forest. A lonely butte, far from the well-trodden paths of people both wild and civilized. It was said to have once been the house of ancient kings who tamed the borderlands. Now it was but a place of wild stories born. Following Argent's trail was easy. The man battered his way through the woods without a care for the marks left in his wake. But following the eight-legged demon was far easier. Wounded as it was, carrying the weight of a grown man, its retreat to the hidden fortress was hasty and ill-wrought. Not only was the forest disturbed in every conceivable way that could be tracked, the thing left a trail of what could only be called webs that sagged between trees and billowed in a gentle wind. It cost him nearly all of his daylight, but Strummer made it. Shigarak's mountain keep was impressive. It rose above the trees, carved from the living stone, from the dark heart of the rocky butte. The season's rains fed a slick layer of moss that broke the facade and made it harder to see through the remaining autumn foliage. From deep inside, Strummer's keen ears heard the sound of suffering, wailing that one could almost mistake for the sound of torture. But Strummer sensed the latent, somatic intent. Magic was in the air, carried through the growing evening air by a dark and powerful will, and wondered if he was hearing the violence of childbirth instead. Now that it was time, a shiver stayed his feet. His mind, body, and soul howled for him to turn back. But Pike howled too. So he breathed like his grandmother taught him, steadied his racing heart, balled his fists into white-hot ingots, and treaded boldly into the ruins. With only a short blade, Strummer tread low and slow through the haunted halls. Shigarak's ethereal cries were his guide. He worried not about the witch, but her thrall, the spider thing dropping from the ceiling to shred him into strips of meat. But the way was clear, for preparations had been made for a ritual most black, and Shigarak was disposed with its conduct. His cries led him to a great hall, an ancient nave whose pews of wood had long ago rotted to dust. In the sanctuary, near an altar stone, a woman was splayed on the ground. Her hair was dark and cut closely to her scalp. She wore nothing but paint and the markings of magic that Strummer knew nothing about. It was difficult to see from this distance, but it was clear she had prepared the space in some way. He could see paint across the floor and imagined she produced a circle like many other sorcerers he had encountered. High above, Aelric swung limply in a gibbet suspended from the rafters. It was impossible to tell if he was alive or dead, but Strummer imagined he must be alive to be at the center of Shigarak's plot. Across the nave, Argent marched through a proud, arched doorway, flanked by Perry. "It's finished, witch. I've terminated your spell," he declared, holding the demon's severed head high by a bloody, mangled mandible. Through great rolling waves of pain, Shigarak laughed. "Tessero wasn't my work. He was my ally, and he did as he was bid." "Fine," he panted, casting the severed head aside. "I'm here to return the child to its rightful place." "How unfortunate for you," she mewed between labors. "But you won't have long to wait." Her labor overtook her rapidly. Strummer left his hiding place and approached the circle, examining the lines and the woman contained within. He recognized none of the work, which didn't mean much. Argent's eyes flicked to him, but they shared no words, just a solemn nod. Shigarak was pushing as hard as she could, and Strummer fought the urge to aid her after seeing Perry struggle to do the same. But between gushes of blood, a shadowed shape began to congeal. Crawling forth from Shigarak's body was a blot of spilled ink that scrabbled first at her knees, then at the cobblestones, inching forward with fingers long and alien. If he had his bow, Strummer would have ended this and put an arrow through her heart. Above, Aelric moaned in existential horror, the gibbet rattling as he sobbed. Argent ordered Perry's retreat, but she didn't hear him. She just stared in awe as she watched the oozing thing crawl free of its mother and try for its feet like a newborn mare. Slowly, the newborn found its feet, unfurling like a bat's wing to stand well over Strummer, well over Argent even. It scanned the room. How, Strummer couldn't say, for it didn't have eyes or even a face. It was an oily, gelatinous blob that carried the bulk of its undulating girth above the floor on two slender, leg-like appendages. But it took their measure nonetheless, weighing them one by one. Exhausted and spread within an inch of her life, Shigarak spat a curse. "The line of Edgar Seminius ends here, starting with Aelric the Disappointing. Taste the black fruit of your father's seed." The blob twisted and seemed to assess Aelric in his cage. Like a coiled spring, it simply extended itself upward until it could look Aelric in the eye. Its noxious and oily skin shuddered like a drumhead and let loose a dreadful, droning call. Then it hoisted itself effortlessly from the ground and enveloped the gibbet with the whole of its form. The cage swung gently in silence, and not even a gurgle escaped the black shape. "Enough of this," Argent called, trudging across the sanctuary and into Shigarak's painted circle, with Perry hot behind. Strummer tried to stop him, but it was too slow, cursing his haste. "You've done enough, witch. Even if Aelric dies, I can tell his father he can sleep at night with you dead, your bones salted and burned." "You're a fool," she panted as he drew near. The words broke in between breaths. "You've broken the seal." Again, Argent stopped in his tracks and saw his mistake. He had dragged a heavy boot across the paint, breaking the lines, and now the black demon dripped from the cage like a gush of running water to the floor below. Aelric's bones were picked clean and dry and collapsed to a pile. Some fell between the iron bands and clattered to the floor. "Kill them all!" Shigarak shrieked, and promptly fell unconscious. Like a thunderbolt, it struck, and Perry was dead. The monstrosity thrust forward like a tidal wave, knocking her feet out from under her. Only after it rose from her body did Strummer see it had shaped itself into a great spear and thrust clean through her chest. Then it exploded at Argent, its body reaching from one foe to the next, arcing across the hall in a powerful gush. Argent met the thing with violence of his own, and was nearly tossed aside like a child, but he managed to keep his feet. "Go!" Argent barked at Strummer. "I'll buy you some time." His axe screamed through the air and met Black's skin. Argent was fast, and the thing, having been born only moments ago, didn't recognize the threat of a man like Argent for what it was. Even after his fight with the egg-legged demon, Argent seemed to have hidden reserves of power that he drew on and used to beat his axe again and again on the beast. Strummer wasted little time. He ran forward, past Argent and the sorceress's child, past Shigarak herself. On either side, an iron staircase spiraled around the halls of the sanctuary, lifting up hundreds of feet to where Strummer didn't know, but the way presented itself, and Strummer climbed like a ghost, sailing up the stairs 2, sometimes 3 at a time, the sounds of Argent's final battle chasing him like rising smoke. There was nowhere left to run. Strummer had run out of stairs to climb, and he was now far too high to chance a descent from a window, even if his sweat didn't slick his hands. He heard the stairs groaning beneath the black abomination, and he knew he was short on time. The room he found must have been Shigarak's chambers. There was a plain wooden bed tucked in the corner, as well as a desk where a black candle flickered from a draught, and, strangely, an arrangement of tall mirrors that must have allowed her to look out the window and into the sky without getting up from her desk. He pushed open the shutters and took in the expanse. Beyond the window, the sun was quickly setting, screaming toward the horizon at unfathomable speeds and washing the forest below in the gorgeous fire of approaching autumnal dusk. What then was to be his salvation in this room? There were no blades in any drawers, no staves to pull from the bed or wooden furniture. If he had the flask in hand, he'd consider uncorking it and bargaining with Zoba, sticking one horror on another. But as the thing darkened the doorway, Strummer was out of time. It slithered through the door, growing as it crossed the threshold, looming over him and the room as it drank in Strummer's fear. His options were spent. He was spent. And now Strummer was trapped. But he'd seen cornered jackals fight to the bitter end, and he resolved himself to do the same. In a last-ditch effort, Strummer jumped to the closest mirror. He could dash it on the floor and use the broken glass as a weapon. But as he wheeled it around, it caught the white fire of the sun and cast it on the thing. Even in passing, the sunlight burned its skin, melting it instantly, like the black wax of the candle on the desk. Its skin thrummed like a drumhead beat violently, and it tried to recoil, to retreat out the doorway. But Strummer leapt too and heaved Shigarak's writing desk across the floor, jamming the door tightly closed. Not for lack of trying did the thing die horribly. But it took time. As the door latched, held tight by the desk, the thing tried to melt through the cracks, even pressing through the keyhole. But Strummer didn't relent, and he recast the mirror. The sunlight poured in like molten gold, reflecting radiant death at the very heart of evil. Under assault, the horror tried to impose its size, but it couldn't regain its composure. Another mirror. Strummer guided it like a matronly grandmother, cradling it on both sides as he guided it into place and leveled yet another sunbeam at his foe. Now its skin thrummed so that it sounded like the drones from the mountain pipers in the north. By now, the sun was very nearly set, and Strummer prayed to any god that would listen to give him even 1 extra second as he wheeled a 3rd mirror into position, and then a 4th. Soon he had each mirror splayed out like a graveyard of vanity, lighting up the room with the purest, most sacred light. The vibration of its death throes rattled Strummer's bones and tickled even the vestigial spaces in his body. This was it. Strummer could feel victory burgeoning, but the bastard would not die. How then to give it a hand? As Strummer watched its skin flutter like an oily reed, he recalled a parlor trick he often performed back in the city wherein he could shatter a glass with nothing but his voice, and he began to chant a dulcet tone, low and sweet, and moving up until his voice intertwined with the abominable yowling, just so. He sensed the right pitch just like he did when singing a duet or when strumming his mandolin, and when he found it, he felt it with the whole of his body, and he pushed as hard as he could. Soon the thing's skin careened, flapping wildly like a bat lost in the morning light, and began sloughing to the floor in great puddles of ooze until he began to see oily black shapes he'd rather not see. And then, like a living candle, the thing took to flame. The descent back to the sanctuary below took a long time. Strummer's legs still burned from the flight up, and his chest heaved with the effort. The scene was largely as he left it, though. Argent was now dead, his body broken inside his armor, which had been crushed like a tin can. Pike's head, contained still within the oiled bag, was not exactly untouched, but Strummer counted himself lucky to have recovered it mostly intact. He tied his friend back onto his belt and gave a reassuring pat, feeling one weight evaporate from his mind, even as he placed another on his hip. The flask, too, was still intact. It was indestructible as far as he knew, but it was a relief to see the stopper still in place and the 7-starred seal intact. Shigarak, too, was unmoved, though blood evacuated her body freely, and her breathing was ragged and sporadic. By any measure that Strummer knew, she was strong. Any woman who could carry and deliver a baby all on her own, let alone deliver whatever that was. He shivered, trying to conjure whatever black malfeasance occurred here. Going to kill me? Shigarak's eyes strained to stay open. I don't think I'll need to, Strummer replied. She laughed. That bad. Whatever you've done, it seemed to work. You won. Won, Shigarak spat. A Pyrrhic victory. Aelric was a fool. We both danced on his father's strings. Not only will Lord Edgar extract his revenge, but... Shigarak hesitated, and seemed to realize it no longer mattered. But the Red One may as well. He does not suffer failure, and his bridge to our world is closed. The Red One? Some devil, then? Strummer asked. Worse, she wheezed. Strummer leaned in close. He wanted to know the truth. Why does one such as you consort with worse than devils? Men are their own kind of devil. One like Edgar Seminius can't be destroyed by ordinary evil. I had to be worse to win. For me, for his wife, for every woman, every person he infects. I'm afraid your sorcery has taxed you beyond my means of help, Strummer said. A mulligan, then, she breathed. How so? Now, I'm beyond the reach of Edgar and the Red One both. The board is reset. It wasn't long after that Shigaraki took her last breath in the darkness of the new moon and her wild keep. Woozy and tired as he was, Strummer dared not take a rest within these walls, and spirited himself as far away as he could before he crumpled beneath the tender canopy of a gnarled oak whose leaves were nearly gone. He cradled Pike in his arms and fell asleep, whispering tearful apologies into his ear, and promising to be at the Staghorn soon. Hey, that's it. I'm glad you guys stuck around. It's a long story, but I like it. I like it a lot, and I liked reading it for you guys. So hopefully it wasn't too unbearable, skipping the audiobook treatment and just reading it like we're doing a fireside chat here. Yeah, if you liked it, you can go and buy the digital magazine and support the publisher that published me, the Savage Realms Monthly Magazine. I was in the December 2025 issue with two other authors who were great to share a table of contents with. If you like this story and want to read another one or hear another one featuring Strummer, I did read The Seven Sealed Flask a while ago. It's on this podcast feed, so just scroll back and see if you can't find it. If not, there's more Strummer stories coming out soon. You can find more of my short fiction on my website, redisawesome.com. But yeah, I thank you for letting me do this, and we'll be back hopefully next week with our regular episode. I'm gonna let the innkeeper off the hook today, and I'm gonna dance you guys out myself. So thank you for listening. Find us at theinattheend.com, dndpodcast.org, or daggerheartpodcast.com. We will be right here on Monday with your regularly scheduled episode. And until then, grab your sword and keep on adventuring.